Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could join us today. I'm Sharon Brewster, Grants Coordinator for the Youth Service Grants Program. I'm joined today by Vivian Sen, Senior Vice President of Program. We'll begin the webinar with an overview of the Youth Service Capacity Building Grants Program, including some background on how it came about and what we're looking to fund. After a brief Q&A session, we'll go over important details of the award, as well as application eligibility and selection criteria. We'll leave about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar to answer any final questions. Please note that we will post the slides and video for the webinar on our website in the next few days. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email once these resources are posted. Also, if you haven't yet, please download and read the application guide for the program. The guide is on our website, and it is included in your web dashboard, your webinar dashboard as a handout. Finally, feel free to post your questions at any time in the dashboard chat box. We'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A periods. So let's get into it. We're here today to talk about the Youth Service Capacity Building Grants Program, which is an entirely new funding opportunity that we launched this summer. These grants will support activities to strengthen the organizational infrastructure of nonprofit organizations in any of the 5 boroughs of New York City that provide direct services to young people ages 5 to 25. The program provides general operating support to allow grantees the flexibility to allocate the funds for organizational capacity building needs over a 3-year term. Importantly, the long-term goal of the program is to help build stronger, more stable youth-serving organizations that will reduce inequality in youth outcomes. You may be wondering why we've decided to focus on building the capacity of local nonprofits with a special focus on reducing inequality. So let's talk about how this program came to be. For almost a century, the Foundation has supported research projects on a national level. We are well known for our programs funding research to improve the lives of young people. At the same time, we have recognized that local nonprofits are critical to improving youth outcomes. We have provided grants to nonprofits in our hometown of New York City since the 1970s. Last year, our staff took stock of the Youth Service Grants Program to learn more about the landscape in which we were making grants and to determine how we could do more to support young New Yorkers and the organizations that serve them. What we learned led to the creation of the Youth Service Capacity Building Grants Program. After months of review, we identified 3 major themes that would inform our work going forward. The first theme was that inequality in New York City is tied closely to geography. Poverty rates are well over 40% in some neighborhoods in the Bronx and Brooklyn, and too few of our grant dollars are going to nonprofits serving those neighborhoods. Second, although inequality is often tied to location, some of the city's most underserved populations are geographically dispersed and are not located in a given neighborhood. For example, Mexican youth are part of the 3rd largest immigrant group in the city, and Mexican families reside all over the city, or not even in a handful of districts. While Mexican youth experience high rates of poverty, there are few organizations providing services tailored specifically for them. Also, LGBTQ youth live in all neighborhoods and communities in the city. These young people face high levels of homelessness, bullying, and self-harm. Still, we found that their needs are often overlooked and their well-being demands greater support. Finally, we learned that among youth-serving nonprofits in New York City, few are led by people of color or LGBTQ individuals. This lack of racial, ethnic, gender identity, and sexual orientation diversity is especially notable in a city as diverse as ours. We responded to the stock-taking work in 2 ways. The first was to redesign our existing grants program with a greater focus on reducing inequality, specifically as it relates to the 3 themes I just shared. Because addressing the needs of underserved populations and areas often falls to smaller organizations, our second response was to support these organizations by creating a program that would give them an opportunity to build and fortify their infrastructure. The Youth Service Capacity Building Grants Program is that opportunity. It aims to support organizations at the front lines of tackling inequality. So you may be asking yourself, what do we mean by capacity building? What is the foundation actually looking to support? Generally, building capacity means becoming stronger as an organization and ultimately getting to a point where you're better able to serve the young people who participate in your program. First, it's a matter of identifying a need and determining a goal that will help you provide better experiences for youth. We found that identifying a capacity building goal is often a result of some type of formal or informal assessment. Formal assessments may include surveying your staff and participants or having focus groups. Informal assessments may include observation or talking to staff and participants. Your specific capacity building goals should be tied to your specific needs. As long as you've identified a need and determined a goal, you're on the right track. Still, we found that many nonprofits face a set of fairly common challenges. For example, financial management, fundraising, information technology, leadership development, strategic planning, and more. Once you identify an area of need, again, most likely through some form of assessment, you'll want to come up with a plan to address it. If human resource management is a notable challenge, for example, you may aim to develop organizational policies and training programs. If fundraising and sustainability are notable needs for your organization, you may want to build capacity in terms of developing and implementing a long term plan for raising funds. As you see, organizational capacity building projects can take many different forms. In addition, we welcome proposals to address needs not listed here. The main thing you'll want to keep in mind is whatever you're proposing to do, it will strengthen your organization and your services. Also, remember, you need to propose only one capacity building plan. You don't need to take on more than one project. We provide a list here only as a reference of what's possible. Just as a reminder, you can find this information in the application guide. We'll get into funding and application details in just a moment. But at this point, we'd like to pause for questions related to the program itself and the types of capacity building projects we're aiming to support.
Sharon, we have one question here where people wanted to learn a little bit more about what you mean by small nonprofit.
What we consider to be a small nonprofit organization are organizations that have an annual budget of between $250,000 and $1 million.
And folks wanted to hear a little bit more about what kinds of capacity building projects you might be interested in. So you gave them a really long list, but are there certain areas of capacity building that the foundation is more interested in than others?
The foundation is interested in capacity building projects that you have done an assessment to find out if it's a need that you need to address. We are really interested in making stronger organizations with their infrastructure. So we would like you to do informal or formal assessments to determine your own needs. And we'd like to see that the capacity building plans or projects that you're picking will address those needs. That's what we're interested in.
Okay. And Sharon, we have one request. If you could just go back to page 8, the slide right before this. Okay. Um, so I think they just wanted to see that. But Sharon, if people miss some of the information in your prior slides, are they going to be available?
The slides will be available. It will be emailed to everyone, but all of this information is in the capacity building program guide. It's currently on your dashboard for the webinar, and it's also on our website.
Okay, great. Thanks. I think that's all we have for now, Sharon. Let's keep moving with the presentation. And then I just want to remind everyone to please put in your questions. We will be following them, or I will be following them as Sharon talks, and we will have another opportunity to take your questions at the end of her presentation. So just go ahead and type in your questions as you have them.
Great. Okay, let's get back into it. In this portion of the webinar, we'll cover important details of the award, eligibility, and selection criteria, as well as what to think about when preparing an application. Each capacity building grant provides $600,000 in general operating support over a 3-year term that begins on March 1, 2020. The award provides $30,000 in the first year to get the work off the ground, $20,000 in the second year, and $10,000 in the third year. Importantly, in the third year, the grantee is required to obtain new outside matching funds of $10,000 in order to receive the final year of funding from the grant. The application for the Youth Service Capacity Building Grants is open only once per year, and we will make 3 awards each year. In addition to the $60,000 in funding, we will also provide grantees with free access to ongoing one-on-one and group support from CRE, Community Resource Exchange, which is a nonprofit consulting firm that provides strategies and tools to help organizations plan for and produce positive results. Okay, let's turn to eligibility requirements. There are 2 sets of eligibility criteria. One is related to your organization, and one is related to the program's Reducing Inequality consideration. Let's walk through it here. Applicants must meet all of the organizational eligibility criteria you see here. I'll go ahead and read through them. First, your organization must serve youth ages 5 to 25, and at least 80% of your participants must be in this age range. If your organization serves adults, at least 80% of the service recipients must be youth. Your organization must have its own 501c3 tax exemption, must have an operating budget between $250,000 and $1 million. Your organization must have had its recent financial statements reviewed by an auditor per New York State law. If your annual budget is under $500,000, then certified public accountants reviewed financial statements are required. Finally, your organization must have filed the IRS Form 990. Again, you must meet all of these criteria in order to be eligible. If you do not meet all of the organizational criteria, you will not be eligible to apply. Let's turn to the second set of criteria now. As we talked at the beginning of the webinar, this program was designed to target funding towards communities and populations that would gain the most benefit given what we learned in our review of inequality and youth services in New York City. Given the focus on reducing inequality in youth outcomes, organizations must meet at least one of the following reducing inequality criteria. Again, I'll repeat it. Organizations must meet at least one of the following reducing inequality criteria. The first one is your organization must currently provide direct youth services in one of the 10 community districts as having the highest community risk to child well-being. This is by the Citizens Committee for Children. The districts are listed here and include 8 in the Bronx and 2 in Brooklyn. Importantly, we're talking about where you provide services. Your main office does not need to be located in one of these community districts. Rather, you must currently provide youth service programming in any one of these community districts. The second criterion for reducing inequality is that your organization currently provides well defined programming tailored specifically to Mexican descent or LGBTQ youth. It's very likely that many nonprofits in New York City serve youth from these communities. However, to apply under this eligibility criterion means that your programming is intentionally designed to serve Mexican descent or LGBTQ youth and that it aligns with their specific needs and experiences. Finally, the third of the reducing inequality criteria is that your organization is led by a person of color and or an individual who identifies as LGBTQ. Again, to be eligible under the reducing inequality criteria, you must meet only one of the three reducing inequality criteria, but you must meet all of the organizational criteria. Let's turn to how we will evaluate proposals for the Youth Service Capacity Building Grants Program. The first word of advice is to make sure you review and understand the eligibility criteria, as well as the guidance on identifying and addressing your capacity building needs and goals. If you are eligible and you have a compelling case that building capacity in a given area will strengthen your ability to improve experiences for youth, you're well on your way. That said, there are three specific criteria that we will consider when we review applications. First, a strong application will provide a clear description of your current youth services and an explanation of how your services contribute to positive experiences of the young people who participate. Please don't mention your capacity building plan in this section. Secondly, a strong application will show that you have thought through and examined your capacity challenges and have identified an area of need and the ways that it has impacted your organization. Again, showing us that you've conducted a formal or informal assessment and discussing what you learned from this assessment is one way you may go about this. Finally, we will want to see that you have a clear and reasonable idea for a capacity building project and a plan to implement it. Tell us your goals and the activities that comprise the plan. Make clear that the plan can be sustained over time and there is a manager to oversee its progress. Finally, tell us how you will determine if the project has been successful. Again, more details on developing and preparing a strong application are provided in the application guide, but we hope this brief overview can give you an idea of what we're looking for. With our remaining time, let's answer some of your questions.
Okay, Sharon, we have a lot of questions, so let me try to triage some of them. The first question is about the match. Does that $10,000 match need to be identified up front and written about in the application? Can it come later? When do they need to have the match?
So how you're going to get the match or where you're going to get the match doesn't need to be identified in your application. We realize that a lot of people have to do fundraising. You'll have to have a fundraising strategy to get the match. And we realize that, so you don't have to identify where you'll get the money when you're writing the proposal. Just realize that there is a match and that you'll need to do it in the third year of the grant.
Okay. There are also some questions here about the operating budget. You said folks can have operating budgets up to $1 million, but what if they have, say, $1.25 million operating budget? Are they still eligible for the grant?
We think that because we're really wanting to focus on smaller organizations, we would prefer and we would like to stick to our original eligibility criteria of $250,000 to $1 million in annual operating budgets.
Okay. And how do you think about those annual operating budgets? Let's say it's a large multi service agency, and let's say $700,000 is goes towards youth programming, but they have a much multi-million dollar budget that covers other services that are not directed at youth. Are they still eligible for this?
So, this program is aimed at building the capacity of organizations, of smaller organizations. We're not looking to build the capacity of larger organizations. It's not program driven, it's basically smaller youth serving organizations. So, we're looking to help build and strengthen those organizations. So, organizations that are huge, that have just small youth serving budgets, are not eligible.
Okay, we have other questions here that are more about the priority, the reducing inequality priority areas. So we have one person on the line who says they fit more than one of the reducing inequality criteria. They have services in more than one of the community districts that you've identified. Or they both serve Mexican descent youth and they're led by a person of color. So is this additive? Do they get even more credit, more points when you do the review process?
No, you don't get extra points, and it's not on a point system. It's an eligibility thing. If you serve youth in these communities, then you're eligible. Or if you serve Mexican descent youth or LGBTQ youth, then you're eligible. If your organization has leaders who are executive directors or CEOs who are people of color and or LGBTQ individuals, then you're eligible. But having multiple um, eligibility criteria met does not give you any additional priority.
Okay, great. Um, Sharon, I have another question, which is a bit about what about organizations that want to expand their services? So, right now, they don't have any programs that directly serve LGBTQ youth, but they're thinking about expanding their services um, to more specifically address that community. Would they be eligible for the grant?
No. Um, what we want to do is to strengthen organizations that currently serve these youth, LGBTQ or Mexican descent youth. We want you to have specifically tailored programming already in place for these youth, that you're already providing services for them. Not that you're thinking about expanding. So we want current programming for them.
Okay. Um, we have another question here um, that's about the informal assessment. Could you go back as people think about developing their applications? You had talked a bit about the kinds of assessments you would suggest that people do in order to inform the development of their proposals. So could you go back and just say some more and give some advice to folks about these assessments and what might be useful?
So basically, there are many different ways that you can assess your program. We're not exactly um, experts in what would be best for your organization, but these are just little examples of things that can be done that's not terribly expensive for an organization. The first one, in terms of a formal assessment, we thought creating a survey and carrying out a survey of your staff, your participants, or your stakeholders would be a form of a formal assessment to find out the organizational capacity building challenges that you may have. Also, if you run focus groups, that may be another form of a formal assessment. An informal assessment would be if you have been doing observations of the program while it's running and you've noticed that you've had some type of um, capacity building challenge. if you talk to your staff and your participants, those are some types of informal assessments that we've thought about.
So let's shift gears a little bit to what the money, the grant funds can be used for. Let's say someone wants to focus their grant on fundraising and fund development activities. Could the grant dollars be used to cover partial salary or full salary for a staff member to build that fundraising capacity?
Basically, when we said that the the grant would be for general operating support, is because we want to give applicants, grantees, the flexibility to allocate the funds in the areas that would best help their capacity building plans, their capacity building project. If the project that you picked um, is for fundraising and you need some of that money to go to staff, that's perfectly fine with us.
Okay. There are also a couple of questions here about what kinds of application support materials we need from people to demonstrate their operating budget size. So there's some uh, language I think that you might have shared, but that's also in the application guide about um, when audited financials will be suitable,
Yeah.
when other materials are fine if they're smaller. And could you just clarify that information for folks?
Sure. So if you're an organization that has an annual operating budget that's 500,000 and over, New York State requires that your financial statements be reviewed by an auditor. If you're an organization with an annual budget that is under $500,000, then you should have a certified public accountant reviewed financial statement. Also, we'd like to see your 990, your most recently filed IRS Form 990. We'd also want you to upload that as part of the application.
Mm-hmm. And if I understand correctly, the New York State requirements about how big you need to be to do an audit has changed recently. Is that right?
It's changed recently, but we've looked it up as of this year, and it's for organizations that's above the $500,000.
Okay. So if folks remember it being differently, you might want to check on the updated New York State requirements. Okay. Oh, I see that it looks like it may have just some of our, so a couple of people on the line are saying that it might have also just changed and gone up to $1 million. So rest assured, folks, we will double check this to make sure our numbers are up to date. And if needed, we will update our application requirements if that's necessary. But the operating budget will remain $250,000 to $1 million in order to be eligible for the grant. But the supporting materials for that, we'll take a fresh look at what the requirements are and make sure that that's correct. Okay. Any other questions here? All right, I want to welcome anyone else who hasn't had a chance yet to ask a question. If you have any questions for us, to please type them in. If not, we are going to wrap up this webinar very soon. But let's give a few more minutes for folks who haven't had a chance to chime in to do so.
And again, you should realize that a lot of the information that's in this webinar is also provided in our application guide, which is on which was given as part of the webinar's function, and also it's on our website.
Oh, okay. So we do have some more questions rolling in. Do people have to propose the same capacity building goal for all 3 years, or can they propose different projects over the course of the 3 years?
Well, it would depend on how long it takes to come up with a plan and to implement the plan. If you can do that in a year, then you can propose something else. But you should realize that it takes a lot of work to actually run your organization and then do this as well. So we're willing to hear what you propose, and you can propose more than one capacity building plan. It's up to you and whether or not your organization feels confident that you can carry out your plans.
Yes. So what I hear you saying, Sharon, is that people should feel free to propose um, projects that meet their needs, tailored
Yes.
to their needs. But we also encourage people to be realistic and to propose projects that are feasible. So don't think that just the more you propose, the more competitive your application will be, because reviewers will be looking at them very carefully to see if the plans seem feasible. And what's most important to us is that people propose important projects that they can successfully complete. Um, there's also another question here about the number of awards. You said 3 new awards per year. Does that mean 3 different organizations per year?
Yes. 3 different organizations per year will receive this award.
Do people, once they get the award, do they have to reapply each year for the next 3 years, like in order to renew their funding for the
No,
following year?
no, these grants are $60,000 over a term of 3 years. The grants are 3-year terms, and you don't have to reapply each year.
Okay. What happens? Let's see here. Okay. Here's a question about the community districts that you mentioned. Now, say they have services provided in one of the districts, community districts, but their organization, does that need to be located in one of those community districts too, or can they be located elsewhere?
Your organization, as long as your organization is based in any of the 5 boroughs of New York City, if you provide services in one of those 10 community districts, then you're eligible.
Okay. And then we have another question here that is about the technical assistance CRE will provide. Now, is that technical assistance going to be directly related to what their, like each individual grantee's capacity building goals are, or are they going to be related to other topics that are not part of uh, the grantee's capacity building goals?
The one on one support is directly related to helping the grantee implement and achieve their capacity building goals and plans. The learning community group cohort meetings will focus on peer based learning and coaching, which will allow grantees to discuss challenges and seek advice from their peers and colleagues and to collaborate across projects in a safe space. So there are 2 types of technical assistance that will be provided, and the one on one support will focus on your capacity building plan and goals.
Okay. So here's a question that's a little bit of a different angle on the geography, the community districts again. Um, what if the nonprofit provides some services to youth from one of those community districts, but the service isn't actually provided in that community? So youth have to travel somewhere else to receive those services. Will that qualify?
So, pretty much, we want the organizations to provide youth programming, youth services in one of those 8 in the Bronx and 2 in Brooklyn community service. We want to strengthen those neighborhoods. We want to strengthen the organizations in those neighborhoods, and we want to strengthen the youth in those neighborhoods.
Okay, great. It looks like we've pretty much run through all of the key questions. Oh, one more. Will CRE be involved in the review of the applications and the selection of awardees?
No. Um, CRE is a great technical assistance provider, and they will help us with that. But the William T. Grant Foundation staff will be reviewing and reading and making recommendations to senior staff about these awards.
Okay, great. Well, Sharon, I think that's been terrific, and we've had a wonderful set of questions. I hope it's been informative to everyone. How would you like to wrap this up, Sharon?
I'd like to welcome all of the potential applicants out there who've listened to um, our webinar to take a look at our guide and make decisions as to whether or not you'd like to apply for this opportunity. Um, and we hope you'll give us a chance to help young, small youth serving nonprofits. That's it. Thank you.